paintings, each found along the so-called path of illumination, once used by the Illuminati to test new members. But is there any truth in the notion that Rome and the Vatican is riddled with such clues? And that these clues were supposedly planted by the city's most famous architect and, according to Angels and Demons, secret Illuminati member, Gian Lorenzo Bernini.
The chapel is Raphael, but the sculptures are Bernini. The unknown Illuminati master, Bernini.
Born in Naples in the year 1598, Bernini was the son of a sculptor. He went to work as his father's assistant when he was only 7 years old, and by the time he reached adolescence, was producing his own commissioned artworks.
Bernini was the perfect image maker for the 17th century. He himself was of a very passionate and creative and artistic nature, much like any youth. He was particularly famous for his tempestuous affairs and his violent temper.
At one point, Bernini suspected that his mistress, Costanza Bonarelli, was having an affair with his own brother. The sculptor confronted his brother at sword point and ordered an assistant to slash Costanza's face with a razor.
The Pope, who was his friend, had to personally intercede and say, look, this is getting out of hand quite radically. Bernini became a much more devoted person. So from that point on, he's able to combine a love of his Catholic faith with a great appreciation of the pagan past, which in some ways are quite incompatible.
According to Angels and Demons, Bernini designed 4 altars of science along the path and strategically placed them to form the points of a cross. Each one represented one of the 4 major scientific elements: earth, air, fire, and water.
Earth, wind, fire, water. These are the essence of what makes up, our world. And these have been worshipped or used in worship since the beginning of pagan religion, essentially worship of nature.
Bernini makes sculpture out of earth, air, fire, and water. It is the very stuff of artistic creation. You might argue that making sculpture is an alchemical magic, and that the stuff of his magic is those basic elements. The earth site is in the Chigi Chapel of Santa Maria del Popolo. When Chigi became Pope, he commissioned Bernini to finish the chapel, which he did, putting 4 astonishing sculptures in it, including the sculpture of Habakkuk and the angel. The earth symbolism in the Chigi Chapel is the burials of the Chigi family, which are placed under the actual chapel in the earth, under what Dan Brown calls a demon's hole, which is just a disc placed on the ground so that you can open it up and go down to the burials below.
This is the first marker. The path is alive.
The outstretched arms of the angel in Bernini's Habakkuk sculpture takes a frantic Robert Langdon southwest to St. Peter's Square. With only 4 hours left before the antimatter bomb might destroy the Vatican, he finds the second altar, this one inspired by the wind. Covering an area of nearly 6 acres and capable of holding up to 8,000 people, St. Peter's Square is one of the artist's greatest architectural achievements.
In front of St. Peter's, he honored all the directions and the winds that blow through the planet. In the plaza, Bernini has marked the 4 cardinal directions with symbols. And the symbol for the west is a disc on the floor of the plaza with an angel's face on it. And the angel has beautiful flowing hair and is blowing like the west wind.
And that image of the west wind is seen as being the good wind, but especially the idea of that as the wind that comes from the interior of the church and brushes out to the populace into that square.
As Langdon races to find the third altar, he heads east along the Tiber River to the Church of Santa Maria della Vittoria. Here, the element of fire can be found in one of Bernini's most acclaimed sculptures.
It is a depiction of the ecstasy of Santa Teresa of Avila, the Spanish saint who at age 50 had a vision of the love of God appearing to her as a beautiful young angel who took the flaming arrow of the love of God and pierced her body.
It's a very fair thing to say that Dan Brown would connect the element of fire to the representation of the ecstasy of St. Teresa, because the agent of God in that is an angel, but not just any angel. This is a seraph. Seraphim, are often shown as being multi-winged, are aflame with God's love.
With time running out, Robert Langdon races to the final point on the so-called Path of Illumination. Searching for a location that represents the element water, he finds the Fountain of the Four Rivers located at the Piazza Navona.
And on each one of these platforms, Bernini and his assistants carved a statue that would represent one of the four main rivers of the world. The four rivers are the Ganges, to represent Asia, the Nile, to represent Africa, the Danube for Europe, and for the newly discovered American continents, the Rio de la Plata. In an age of discovery, this fountain was emblematic of the new worlds that were being discovered every day.
Each of these allegorical figures flows with water to fill the fountain. And between them, in the center of those four monumental, gigantic figures, is an immense obelisk rising above it.
A lot of the works of art that feature in Angels and Demons, the ones associated with Bernini, supposedly the Illuminati master, feature Egyptian symbolism. The question is, why should there be such a vote at that time for Egyptian symbols, for pyramids, obelisks, hieroglyphs, all those things? Because you wouldn't expect it, because Egyptian symbols were actually employed by the Rosicrucians. So it's actually the last thing you'd expect the Vatican and the Pope to want to spread around Rome at that period.
Look, right in front of the church. An obelisk, a lofty pyramid. Egyptian symbol adopted by the Illuminati.
In fact, Egyptian obelisks can be seen throughout the city and are prominently placed at many points along the Path of Illumination.
So here we have the pagan symbol, the obelisk, placed in front of St. Peter's. And above that pagan symbol at the very top is what? A cross. And the cross casts its shadow, casts its light, casts its rays 360 degrees around that obelisk.
The Romans conquer the Egyptians, and they take those obelisks and they re-erect them, showing how the Christian civilization has triumphed over the long gone, long dead civilizations.
There it is.
When you get to the one in the Piazza Navona, you have also the dove with the olive branch. Well, the then Pope who commissioned this work from Bernini is a Pamphili. The Pamphili Palace is right there in Piazza Navona, and the Pamphili symbol was the dove with the olive branch. So it's this Pope covers the world under the light of Christ.
Almost every part of the city, whether you're following an Illuminati map or not, you're going to be running into things that Bernini did that changed the city. He transformed the city as a sculptor, as an architect, and as a city planner. There are, I think, symbols in his art because symbolism is simply a kind of visual language, which I think was more important in the time period that we're looking at in the 17th century and earlier, because still a large portion of the population could not read and could not write.
Bernini would spend the rest of his life working on styles of architecture and works of art that would allow us to glimpse a magical supernatural world beyond.